737 in your pew Bible, which is John chapter 2. And for those of you who once were in a Bible study here probably a while back, y'all would know this little phrase, but that John's gospel is not a synoptic gospel. Matthew, Mark, and Luke are synoptic gospels, and that just means they see from the same perch. They come from the same kind of thinking, some come from the same source, and John is just a whole different thing, which makes his gospel really unique and wonderful. And chapter 2 is what is normally known as Jesus' first miracle, and I think it's here today to speak to us. I hadn't spoken on this chapter, this verse in a long time, but I'm excited about it. So if you would, just turn to John chapter 2, verses 1 through 11, and I'll read. On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Now I'm going to do this a little bit Bible study-wise. It's probably going to drive you crazy, but you're just going to have to look down and look up. So just look up at me for a second. If I'm going to draw a map in the air here, here's Judah, here's Samaria, and here's Galilee. And this makes up Israel. Those three regions, Judah, Samaria, and Galilee. Judah was where Jerusalem was, and all sort of the activity of the Jewish faith was down there. Samaria is where Samaritans lived for the most part, which meant that they were half Gentile or part Gentile, or, you know, they were sort of some version of Heinz variety and were considered not to be associated with from the Jewish community. So there were caravan trails that would go around Samaria up to another solid part of Israel as far as heritage and lineage and purity of race. And that's Galilee. But Galilee, to put it in Alabama language, would be in the rural area out in the sticks. Farm territory. Auburn fans, those kinds of people. So they would be up in Galilee, and Cana is just a little tiny town way up here in Galilee, way away from everything that's going on in Jerusalem. So up here, whatever Jesus would do would seemingly be somewhat in obscurity. A little more removed, not going to get on the internet, only going to be word of mouth. Did you hear about this country guy that did such and such? It's going to be that kind of talk. So we're at his first miracle. And Jesus had three homes, we know that. He was born in Bethlehem, we all know that. Of course, he was in Egypt for a little short while. We'll call that an extended vacation. And then he came back from Egypt after a year or two and was raised in Nazareth in Galilee. So he's a country boy. His daddy was a blue-collar worker, and that's where Jesus is raised, is way up here, Samaria, and down here, Judah. So he's way away from all the religious activity, kind of isolated up there. That's why it's easy to understand that for 30 years, he could work in his daddy's carpenter shop way up here in the rural area, and nobody would know who he was. And he was just obscure up here. So now he's at just an old country wedding. Now, my favorite country wedding was, I did a wedding out by a lake, and they did something I've done a lot of weddings that I've never seen anybody else do, and I thought it was a fabulous idea. They put like 20 or 30 picnic tables, lined them up lengthwise. They invited a couple hundred people to the wedding, and the reception was potluck. I bet nobody else has been to a wedding like that. And it was out by a lake, and everybody wore country clothes, and the bride had a garland of flowers and dressed in white, and the groom was barefoot and had on kind of like a cool version of a leisure suit. And then after the wedding, everybody got the stuff out of the house and put it all on the tables, just like you would see in the movies, and it was a fabulous feast. Great idea. So maybe this was a little bit like that. And So Jesus is way up here in the rural area, Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had been invited to the wedding. So at this point in time, Jesus has sort of already gathered up either part of the 12 or all of the 12. Verse 3, when the wine was gone, now I'm going to stop there for a second. That's part to drive you crazy. It's only 11 verses. You can handle this. When the wine was gone, now I just look up here for a second. Quit looking down at the Bible. So when the wine was gone, now if you've been to a foreign country, most of you probably have, especially a third world country, you cannot drink the water. And the people think that the people there can drink the water and not get sick, but the people get sick from that water as well. It's a myth that they've built up a tolerance. They may have built up some tolerance, but not complete tolerance, because they also drink bottled water and other things. But in Jesus' day, you either drank wine or you drank some version of water that you could trust. So wine obviously was not a choice at a wedding like an open bar where you have beer, wine, Diet Coke, regular Coke, you got water, you got punch. None of that's going on. It's either water or wine. So when you're at a big wedding and the wine's running out, and the only thing that's left possibly is water that maybe they can't even drink, you got a problem. And it's an embarrassing problem. The wine was gone. Jesus' mother said to him, they have no more wine. Now you got to think about this for a second. I know I'm driving you crazy. Just hang in here with me. I look up here again. Thank you. Jesus' mother saying they have no more wine. Now Jesus hadn't done anything yet. Now your Jesus that you know has done a million things. That's all in your head right now. But you got to go back to a point in time when he's done none of that. Nothing. And his mother looks at him and says, they're out of wine. Now he's getting ready to say, basically, why are you telling me that? That's basically what he's getting ready to say. Why are you telling me that? You don't want me to do something that's prior to my time coming from God the Father to begin my ministry, do you? He's about to say something that's sort of like that to his mother. Why do you want me to do something about the wine? Don't you know the time is not right yet? Now that's interesting to me. Because for 30 years we know nothing about Jesus, basically. We know when he was 12 and he went to the temple. But now you got to get in his mother's head. His mother has to have noticed that this boy is different. He hadn't thrown a rock through somebody's window. He hadn't pushed a kid over. He hasn't whined about everything. He hasn't found how to early manipulate his parents one against one another. Something is different about this kid. So much so that maybe along the way something happened that they were going, other than just basic character issues and behavior, maybe there was a few times when they couldn't understand exactly what did happen. So now they're at a wedding, and his mother says, you got to get your head in this, they're out of wine. Do you think she's ever seen Jesus do anything with wine? I bet she hasn't. Maybe. Don't know. But I bet she hasn't. Now you got to get into the water to wine miracle for a second, because we're getting ready to read it, of course.